One of my favorite home automations is these lights automatically coming on under my bed when I get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. As soon as my feet touch the floor, the lights fade into a really dim brightness, lighting up the path to the bathroom so that I don't fall over and wake up my partner or step on any Lego. As soon as I enter the bathroom, a light strip comes on under the bathtub, gently lighting up the room so I don't miss the toilet bowl and accidentally piss on the floor. When I'm done, I wash my hands, head back to bed, and the lights slowly fade out and turn off. For me, this is the epitome of home automation. Your house reacting automatically to what you need, when you need it, without having to use an app on your phone or to speak to a robot. Motion-activated lights are some of the most useful automations in any smart home, and they're also some of the easiest automations to create. All you need is a motion sensor, a smart light, and a home automation hub. Unfortunately, doing this automation well is much harder, and you've probably found yourself plunged into darkness because your motion sensor stopped detecting you, frantically waving your hands in the air in the hope that it will turn the lights back on. In this video, I'm going to show you all the tips and tricks that I've learned for creating bulletproof motion activated lights over the years. Let's take a look. If you've been around here for a while, then you know that I recently bought a new house, and that I'm on a journey to make it the best dang smart home that ever was. So far, I've got my internet, home network, and a server installed into a comms rack, and I've chosen the best Zigbee smart switches for use with my existing lights. I've made videos about all these things, which you can check out in a playlist here, and I've linked to it in the description below. Whilst you're down there, why not subscribe to the channel so that you can come along on this journey with me? I'm sure we're all going to learn a lot. But now, it's time to take these smart home foundations and start creating some actual home automations. I use motion-activated lights all through my house, in almost every room. In fact, after spending many hundreds of dollars replacing my light switches with smart versions, I ironically almost never touch them with my hands. To detect motion, I use a combination of these three Zigbee motion sensors to trigger the lights to turn on. The one on the left is the Sonoff SNZB-03 motion sensor, and the other two are from Aqara. The Sonoff is my go-to sensor when I'm looking for a solution to stick on the ceiling, usually in the hallways and above my stairs. They have a 6-meter detection range and a 110-degree field of view, making them perfect for this use case. These sensors use a CR2450 circular battery, which lasts for about a year. I like this sensor because it's very discreet, works consistently well, and pairs directly with Home Assistant via my Zigbee network. I've probably got 5 or 6 of these scattered throughout my house, mostly at either end of the hallways and above the stairs. The middle sensor here is the original Aqara Zigbee motion sensor, and the one on the right is the newer version known as the P1. The P1 is basically the same as the original motion sensor, but it has a longer battery life and the ability to adjust the sensitivity level, turn on and off the flashing blue LED when motion is detected, and most importantly, you can change the detection interval. Both the Sonoff and the original Aqara have a cooldown period of about 2 minutes. That means that once motion is detected, it won't redetect or clear that motion event for those 2 minutes. We'll come back to that later. But you can adjust this for the P1 and set the detection interval to be as low as a second or up to 200 seconds. Just bear in mind that if you lower the detection interval, it will reduce the battery life because it has to send back and forth more data more frequently. Both of these Aqaras also work really well with Home Assistant and pair easily with my Zigbee network. Motion sensors like this work best when the motion passes across the sensor rather than towards it, so get creative where you place them. For my automated underbed lights, I've stuck them upside down to the bottom of my bedside tables so they detect my legs when I get out of bed or walk into the room. This way they don't detect any motion if I'm rolling over in my sleep or anything like that. The ones in the hallway and the stairs I stick to the ceiling, and occasionally I just pop them on a bookshelf like this. The sensors all come with double-sided tape to mount them, but I've ruined far too many walls and ceilings in my time to bother with that. Instead, I just use a small nugget of some good old-fashioned blue tack to stick them into place. This has held some of my sensors up for over a year, and it makes it much easier to take them down to replace the battery or to reposition them. Next, you're going to need some lights that will turn on and off when you enter a room or an area. I've obviously got my smart light switches, which control the big lights on my ceiling, and a few of these accent lights. In other places, I use LED light strips. I actually have quite a few of these light strips because the last house I lived in was a rental, and I couldn't go around replacing all the light switches with smart versions. In that house, I relied mainly on smart light bulbs in lamps and these strips for my automations and barely used the main lights at all. I almost exclusively use Philips Hue LED strips because I've just found them to be the best. I've tried a few cheaper alternatives over the years and they all usually have the same flaws. The cheaper strips rarely dim properly, and I find it impossible to tell any difference between 10% brightness and 1% brightness. These Hue strips fade all the way down to 1% very consistently. They also change really nicely from cool white to warm white, and can be set to any other color you want them to. Other lights I tested looked more yellow than warm white, even if they had allegedly separate white LEDs that should have been adjustable. The Hue strips also act as a Zigbee router, and they're really reliable. When you want them to turn on, they turn on, which wasn't always the case with the cheaper Zigbee alternatives. Unfortunately, Philips Hue strips are really expensive, and I honestly haven't tested every single strip out there, so there's bound to be something that will work just as well for far less money. You don't need to use Philips Hue, they just happen to be the ones that I find work well for me. If you know of any other LED strips that you would personally recommend, then why not share them in the comments below? We're all here to learn. No matter which LED strips you choose, I've got a few tips that I've learned over the years to get the best results. Firstly, you should never see the LED strips themselves straight on. They should be mounted so the light from them reflects off a surface. If you look directly at an LED strip, you can clearly see the individual lights, and it looks really fugly. If you mount them behind or under things like cabinets, the light becomes more diffused and it looks far better. Secondly, the sticky part on the back of the LED strips usually isn't that sticky. You're better off buying some of these plastic LED strip holders that have double-sided tape on the back of them. Then you can stick these onto the surface you want to put your lights on and hook the strips into it. Alternatively, you can use some fresh, strong, double-sided tape along the back of the whole strip and stick it on that way. You can also buy some of these aluminium channels for the lights to go into. The original sticky part of the LED strips is good enough to stick them into these channels, and the aluminium will dissipate the heat away from them, which increases the lifespan of the LEDs themselves. The channels have an opaque plastic cover on them that slides into place and further diffuses the light to make it look even better. You still shouldn't see directly into it, the diffusion isn't that good, but they do help a lot. The channels are usually sold in 1 meter lengths, and you can cut them to size using a standard hacksaw. They come in a flat channel like this, or a V shape that you can use to mount them into a 90-degree corner. You can buy both kinds online. Just make sure that you measure the width of your LED strip and buy a channel that will properly accommodate it. I've had to send some back before because I didn't correctly pay attention to the width. I really need to get better at measuring. To make the channels look better and to make the runs stronger, I recommend offsetting the plastic covers with the metal channels. If you've got a 1.5 meter run of channel, put the half meter of plastic into the 1 meter channel, and then use the 1 meter piece of plastic to join the half meter piece onto it. You can then stick the channel onto the surface you want to mount it on using the included screw-in clips or using some double-sided tape. LED strips can be cut to size with a pair of scissors or some snips. Just make sure that you cut at the right place, which you can usually see on the strip marked with an icon. And please, turn off the LED strip before you cut it. If you need to make the strip longer, you can buy extension sections or specialist cables online to join LED strips together. Once again, make sure that you buy the ones that are designed for your light strip. The pins aren't always in the same place. Most of these connectors clip or crimp into place, so you don't even need to do any soldering. I mounted an LED strip under my bed using the clips that I showed you earlier, with a piece of strip on either side of the bed joined together with an LED strip extension cable that I bought online. I didn't bother with the aluminium channel here because I'm lazy. The lights reflect really well off my carpet, which creates a really nice glow under the bed. I also have another strip that I've mounted to the back of the bed head, which reflects off the wall behind it. I just used some cable ties and safety pins to hold this one in place, which is a bit janky, but it works. Now that we've got our motion sensors and our lights sorted out, it's time to start automating. We'll start with the hallway and the stairwell. These are areas that nobody really loiters in, so I want the lights to turn on when somebody walks into that area, and then turn off again when the person is gone. I do all of my automating in Home Assistant, but you should be able to apply the same logic to almost any smart home platform like Amazon, SmartThings, Habitat, the Aqara Hub, whatever you're using. The logic is the part you need to get right. The platform usually doesn't matter. Our automation is going to be triggered when the motion sensor detects motion, or in this case, the state of the motion sensor changes from off to on. We can do this in Home Assistant using a state trigger. We want to turn on our light by selecting an action to call the light turn on service. We then choose which light we want to turn on, in this case the lights on my stairs. This is the simplest kind of motion sensor automation, and when I now walk up to the stairs, the sensor detects me and it turns on the lights. Of course, the lights will then just stay on forever, so we need to get them to turn off again when the person leaves. To do that, we'll add a wait for trigger action to our automation, and have the automation wait around, doing nothing until the sensor hasn't reported any motion. This is basically the reverse of what we put into the trigger part of the automation, and for added safety, we'll wait for it to have not detected any motion for at least 30 seconds. This means that if I stop halfway down the stairs for some reason, maybe to look out of the window or something, and then start moving again 20 seconds later, it won't turn off the lights on me. And remember that cooldown period that I mentioned before? Well, this 30 seconds applies after that cooldown period. So if the cooldown is 2 minutes and you set the automation to wait until no motion has been detected for 30 seconds, then it will actually turn the lights off after 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So finally, I add one more action to call the light turn off service, and I turn the same light off again. So let's put it all together. The automation is triggered when the motion sensor detects motion. It turns on the light and then hangs around waiting until the same motion sensor stops detecting anyone for at least 30 seconds, and then it turns the light off. This is really easy to set up, and people who come visit me absolutely love the fact that they can walk into a hallway, bathroom, or onto the stairs and have the lights automatically turn on for them, especially if they've never been to my house before and they don't know where any of the light switches are. But do you really want the lights to turn on in the middle of the day? You've probably got windows and open blinds, so you don't want the lights coming on when it's already pretty bright. To fix this, we can add a condition to this automation so that it only runs after 6 PM and before 6 AM. If you want to be even more pro, we could use a condition to check if the sun is below the horizon or not. This is better than adding a time-based condition because it will adapt automatically in the summer and in the winter when the sun rises and sets at different times. The Aqara motion sensors actually have built-in light meters, which you can use to determine if the room is bright or dark. You could use a different condition, called a numeric state condition, to only run the automation if the light levels recorded by that motion sensor is below a certain threshold. The lights will then come on during the day if the blinds are closed, or if it's a really gloomy day outside. I don't really know what lux is, but I've found that turning the lights on when the lux level is below 50 gives me the best results. The automation still works the same way, but before it does any of the actions, it will check the conditions, and in this case, it will only turn the lights on if the lux levels in the room are below your chosen number. One of the drawbacks of this type of automation is that the stairs, for example, have a top and a bottom, and some hallways are really long, so one motion sensor might not be able to cover the whole area. What I do is put a motion sensor on each end of the hall, or one at the top and at the bottom of the stairs. In some really big areas, I might even put an extra motion sensor halfway down as well. I then group these sensors together in the Home Assistant Helpers section. Here you can create a new binary sensor group and add all the sensors for that area to the group. If any individual sensor now detects motion, it will set that group to on, and it will only set it back to off when all of the motion sensors detect no motion. So if I walk down the stairs, the motion sensor at the top of the stairs detects the first bit of motion, and then sets the group to on. I keep walking down the stairs, triggering all the sensors on the way down, and the group will eventually set itself off when all of the sensors stop detecting that motion. We can now adjust our automation and replace the motion sensor trigger to use the group instead of the individual motion sensor, and do the same for the wait for trigger in the actions area. It's still the same automation, but it will turn on the lights no matter which direction I approach the stairs from. It's also less likely to turn the lights off if I stop in the middle because there's a sensor there to detect that as well. It works really well, and I use this kind of automation all over my house, in the hallways, the stairs, and even in my bathroom. I usually mount the Aqara motion sensor underneath the bathroom cabinet, pointing out towards the door. That means the lights turn on instantly when someone walks in, but unfortunately, that means the motion sensor can't see the toilet or the shower, and there's been plenty of times when I found myself sitting in the dark. One thing you can do to prevent this is increase the value in the wait for trigger to be longer, like 5 minutes or so. This is what I've done for my bathroom automations to reduce the risk, and it works for the most part. Another trick is to add another condition which checks to see if the bathroom lights are already on, and only trigger the automation if the lights are off. This way, if I know I'm going into the bathroom for a shower, or for an extended period of time, I first turn on the lights manually and then turn them off again when I'm finished. This prevents the automation from running and guarantees a darkness-free session. By the way, the bathroom is where I do a lot of my YouTube admin, so if I've replied to one of your comments, it was probably while I was pooping. Hey, where did all my subscribers go? There are going to be times when you want different lights to come on in an area depending on the time of day. For example, you might want the lights to come on at 100% brightness during the day and something far dimmer during the night. Or in the case of my bathroom, I want the ceiling lights to come on during the day, but only this LED strip under my bath if I go into the bathroom at night. To achieve this, I replace the action which turns on my lights with a choose action. I then add an option and use the time condition to check if it's after 10 PM or before 7 AM. If that's the case, then I call the light turn on action and turn on just the underbath light. If you're using a light that supports dimming like an LED strip, you could call the light turn on service here with a value in the brightness section that makes sense for the time of day. In the default action area at the bottom, I tell it to turn on both the ceiling and the underbath light. This default action is only run if none of the actions further up the chain are triggered. The rest of the automation is the same, with the final action turning off both the lights. Even if only one light is turned on by the automation, there's no harm turning off both to cover all your bases. Using these motion sensor automations that I've just shown you, I'm able to create the experience that I showed you at the start of the video. The motion sensor underneath my bedside table triggers the underbed lights to 10% brightness as soon as my feet come out of the bed and touch the floor. I can then walk towards the bathroom, seeing where I'm going, and when I open the bathroom door, the motion sensor there under the cabinet detects me and it turns on the underbath LED strip. Once I leave the bathroom and the motion sensor hasn't seen anything for 2 minutes, the lights turn off in there. If the lights have gone out in the bedroom, the motion sensor notices me walking back into the bedroom and turns on the underbed lights again. I get back into bed, and after 2 minutes, the lights slowly fade out over 10 seconds. It's just magical. This is probably the one automation that made my partner really understand the power of home automation. I've heard her complain numerous times when we're staying in a hotel or somewhere other than our own room that the lights don't automatically turn on. Sadly, there is a limitation with these types of automations, and that's in places where you find yourself sitting down for long periods of time, like in my home office, the living room, or the dining room. Here, the motion sensors aren't sensitive enough to detect you if you're slobbing around watching TV or sitting still typing away at a computer. In these areas, I've started using a new type of motion sensor that's become popular over the past couple of years. This is an Aqara FP1 mmWave sensor, which uses a type of radar waves to detect very small amounts of movements, like fingers moving over a keyboard or even the rise and fall of your chest as you breathe. These are really accurate in detecting if a room is occupied or not. The FP1s also paired a home assistant using Zigbee, and I've put them into rooms pointing at where we usually sit down, like the sofa or our work desks. I then add them to a home assistant binary sensor group, just like I did when I added 2 or more motion sensors together. I usually put both a normal motion sensor and an FP1 into the sensor group. This is because the standard motion sensor usually picks up motion much quicker than the mmWave sensor, so the lights turn on instantly when I walk into a room. The mmWave sensor then takes over, keeping the lights on whilst I'm sitting down, and turns the lights off once I've left the room. I've made a more detailed video about these sensors in the past, and you should definitely go check that out. I've linked to it in the description below. There's also a new sensor on the market, made by a fellow home automation YouTuber, called the Everything Presence 1. It combines both the normal motion sensor and a mmWave sensor, a light sensor, and even a temperature and humidity sensor into a single device. This way you get the benefit of the 2 individual sensors I added to a group in one single unit. The main downside to these is that they need to be powered by a 5-volt supply like a USB-C cable, so you can't really stick them underneath your bathroom cabinet or onto a ceiling. It's also hard to buy because they're really popular and often go out of stock. I have one of these under my TV, which points at the sofa, and another one in the living room, and they've been flawless. The sensor uses Wi-Fi to connect to Home Assistant rather than Zigbee, but I'm more than happy about this because the sensor is really just so damn good. I've got a bunch more of these on order to use in other places around my home. Go and get yourself one if you're looking for the best presence sensor to use in these sorts of environments. And whilst you're there, go watch some of Lewis's videos. His home automation videos are excellent. Far better than mine. Anyway, you now know how to make bulletproof motion sensor automations in your smart home. Have you learned anything from this video? Have I missed anything that you do in your automations? Let me know in the comments below. It really helps me figure out what kind of content should be included in future videos and helps us all learn. To be honest, automatic light automations like this are probably the most used automations in my house. The lights in almost every room automatically turn on and off at the right time and at the appropriate level of brightness for the time of day. I barely ever touch a light switch with my hands, and I save energy and money because I never need to remember to turn off a light when I leave a room. Do you know what is super annoying though? Having to use my hands to open and close my blinds each day. My next project is going to be automating these. And then in the future, we'll replace some of the boring Philips Hue light strips with something a little more fancy that can do patterns and all sorts of other cool tricks. For that, we're going to need to learn about individually addressable LED strips and something called WLED. Do you want to see how each of these things work? Well then make sure that you're subscribed to the channel so that you don't miss out, and then together we can make your home smarter.